Hey everybody, Bearded Rogue back again today. I figured I would finish the video games video that I started yesterday. I intended on talking about 4 games yesterday, but ended up only talking about 2, so we'll just make this the sequel and we'll talk about the other 2 video games that I've been playing recently. So, the first one that I want to talk about is a game called Cultist Simulator. Cultist Simulator is yet again another single-player game. It's designed by the people who originally designed Echo Bazaar and the Night Circus and those other online storytelling type games. Echo Bazaar was something that I got into several years ago because it's browser-based. It was something that I could play from wherever I was. I could take my turns and then sign out and move on. It's set in this very bizarre, weird Victorian London called Fallen London, in this case. The idea being London has fallen underground and all sorts of supernatural elements and other weird things have happened. There's all sorts of creepy masters running things and stuff. But it was a game that I was really into for quite a while, and when I heard that the designers, the originators, the creators of it, had started a new company and were going to be creating a new game that was also going to be narrative in tone, I was interested. When I found out that it was going to be about running your own cult while trying to continue to navigate the worlds of Victorian, I guess England, they don't really say, and avoid police notice and at the same time try to ascend to basically godhood, I was even more intrigued because I've never played a game where that is my goal. So I wanted to check it out. It's a very different game. I think it's one of those games that somebody will either like or they will hate. It is a game that takes a lot of time to play. It is a game that is very opaque on the surface, intentionally so, because you are playing someone who is piercing the veil of reality and slowly learning about the world that exists behind that veil. They wanted to keep things cryptic and wanted to have the player actually discovering things. So they don't do a lot of hand-holding. Like, there's not really a tutorial. There are notes scattered throughout the game that give you some kinds of directions, but a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is learning from previous runs and figuring out what you should do and what you shouldn't do. It's... There are some people who really don't like that aspect of it. Sometimes you can literally just get stuck and not know how to proceed. And if you don't read everything, you can't figure it out. Or you're missing one particular thing and you need to do a whole bunch of other things to even find that thing to progress the way that you need to. So that can be frustrating for some people, especially given the length of time that it plays in. But there's multiple different cults that you can found on the multiple different pieces of esoteric lore that exist in the game. Each one has their own kind of progressions as things go. They're going to be adding more content as time goes on. But the most interesting thing about the game for me is that it's kind of board game-esque, but it could only really be implemented the way it is inside of a video game. So basically, you have this blank surface, think a tabletop, okay? And on that tabletop, you will have these square icons that are verbs, things that you do. So there's a work verb, there's a study verb, there's a dream verb. I think there's like 5 or 6 in total that you get over the course of the game. And inside of it, each one of these has a slot for cards. So you can take these cards and you can stick them in the slots to create different actions. So the first thing you start out with are basic statistics, like you have your health. If you put your health in the work verb, then you will do manual labor. This will give you a little bit of money, a little bit of funds is what they call it. And funds are necessary for survival. Every day in game time, you will lose one fund to pay for your survival. If you don't have it, you start getting sick and you can eventually die. So you have to make money. That's one of the balancing acts in the game, is that you have to have enough money to continue your basic survival. Manual labor is one way to do that. It's a terrible way. But you can, if you work with your health, or you sleep with your health. If you sleep with your health, you're basically turning in early to get a good night's rest. And this can generate secondary statistics. So the secondary statistic for health is vitality. And then you can use vitality with those verbs, in this case, study. You use a couple of vitalities with study, and you can upgrade your health stat, which gives you an additional health, but also gives you a card, basically, saying that you've worked out. And now you can use that with your health in the work verb to work with less chance of injury, or even no chance of injury if you upgrade it enough. It's still not a lot of money, but it is an option if you absolutely have to. And all of the verbs work this way. So all of the different cards that you acquire throughout the course of the game a lot of them can be played in the various verbs to different effects, and can be combined in the various verbs to different effects. Eventually, at some point, you'll discover some esoteric lore, at which point you can start your own cult. Then you can start recruiting followers for the cult. You can start advancing your knowledge of the cult and the esoteric lore. All the while, you're dodging basically the reality police, the people who are trying to keep the esoteric order under wraps and keep everybody safe from it. They can find evidence and eventually, like, arrest you, or arrest your followers if you can lead them astray, or you can get evidence, I can't remember exactly what it is, but you can get alibis and stuff like that to kind of put them off the scent, or you can outright kill them. Have your followers go kill these detectives in order to get them off your trail. There's all sorts of things to manage inside the game. It very much is a time management game. It does have a pause button. Like, it does play in real time. You can also speed up the time, because every verb, when it's working, has a timer clock that will spin around it, and once it gets to the end, it'll move to the next step. Either it'll complete the action that it was taking, or it'll ask for something else to continue that action, etc., etc. There's tons of flavor text in this. You're going to be researching esoteric books to get lore, to combine lore, to learn more about the reality on the other side of the veil, and various other aspects of it. And each cult plays differently, and has its own unique aspects to it. I don't want to say too much. I think I may have already said too much in some circumstances, because the discovery of the game is one of the biggest enjoyments for me. The initial discovery of everything was really exciting. Trying to figure out how things went together, or what order to do things in, or it really satisfied that kind of part of my brain. Figuring out how properly to do that sort of stuff. It's very much about optimization and time management, and at the same time, learning about esoteric lore and running a cult. So, pretty neat game. Not for everyone. I will say that again, it is not for everyone. It's a little slow for some people, and it can be very frustrating for some people. But I personally really, really enjoy it. And each cult has a different way of doing things. They've already set it up so that they're going to be adding additional content to the game, including DLC at some point. I'm really excited either way. I think it's a really cool game, and a very different game that has a board gamey feel to it. So I really like that one. The second game that I wanted to talk about is Enter the Gungeon. So Enter the Gungeon is a roguelike. It is also a twin-stick shooter. Let me kind of define those for people who aren't as into video games, or into more recent video games, because both of those have only come about in like the last 5 or so years, as far as common usage goes. So what characterizes a roguelike is basically that you are going to go on separate instances of the game. You're going to play multiple instances of the game, but there is some overarching progress that you make over the course of the game. So in a game of Enter the Gungeon, you basically enter the first level of the Gungeon, and you fight as far as you can, hopefully through the end of the game. You can beat that one instance of the game. As you do that, you'll do various things, find various items, or earn experience, or unlock items for future runs. That then, when you go to play the next time, there will be more stuff for you to interact with, and more stuff for you to unlock. There are multiple characters that you can play as. To start with, you have the four main characters, which are the Marine, who's a Doom pastiche, the Huntress, who has a little corgi pet that digs up items for you and comes with a crossbow, the Convict, who has a sawed-off shotgun as a secondary weapon, and also has a infuriating picture based on Memento, like that's a Memento Easter egg. That whenever you get hurt, you get angry and are able to do additional damage to things in the room that you're in. And finally, the Pilot, who has discounts on items and trusty lockpicks, so he can potentially get a 50% shot at opening locks without keys. But in a roguelike, you're expected to die a lot. You're expected to fail a lot. However, there's a ton of progress that you make, even in a run that ends in failure. Even in a run that ends in success, you won't have completed the entirety of the game, you will just have completed one instance of the game. So that kind of covers roguelikes and gives you an idea of the different characters. Beating the game with each character unlocks additional stuff. So, you beat it with the Marine, you unlock some stuff. You beat it with the Pilot, you unlock some other stuff. And that'll show up in subsequent runs after that. So there's an overall experience to the game beyond just a single sit-down instance of it. Which has become really popular lately. Roguelikes have become a very big thing. They're called roguelikes because of the game Rogue, which existed way back in the day, and featured a similar type of mechanism, and a lot of other games have recently adopted it quite heavily. There are other games that have existed before now, but it's only really come into modern video game usage in the last, I think, 5 years. Maybe it's a little bit longer than that, but there were things that existed before the modern ones, but now they're kind of everywhere. Roguelike is a very traditional experience at this point. There's a lot of people who refer to Slay the Spire as a roguelike, because each instance of the game you can earn experience to unlock additional cards and unlock additional items, etc., etc. So it has that kind of aspect to it. Invisible Ink also is a bit like that, in that as you play, each time you play, you'll unlock additional agents and additional items and additional locations and stuff like that. So roguelikes are something I appear to be very into, and video gaming as a whole is kind of into them right now. The other thing it is a twin-stick shooter, and this is something that I'm less familiar with. So there are several games out now that use this twin-stick shooter method. It's called twin-stick because of a console controller, the two analog sticks. One of them is used to move your character, and the other one is used to change your point of aim. So like in the old school first-person shooters, you would use your arrow keys or WASD to move yourself around, and then you would use mouse look to change where you were looking to fire at various things. This is kind of the same principle, except they usually use like a top-down isometric angle look. And so one moves your guy around on the screen, moves your character around on the screen. The other one moves your point of aim, so that you can be moving in one direction and firing in another direction at the same time. There are a lot of popular ones that have come out recently. Probably the most popular one is a game called The Binding of Isaac. Board game fans may recognize that this recently had a board game Kickstarter that was made for this game that was based on the video game The Binding of Isaac. So I don't know if that's the originator of it. I'm not as familiar with it. Like I said, I've only recently gotten back into video games, like in the last 6 months or so. But twin-stick shooters have also become very popular. Enter the Gungeon is one of those. So you run your little character around through the Gungeon, fighting enemies and picking up additional weapons and items and trying to take out the bosses and eventually getting through it. The story behind it is that you are a character who has a horrible tragedy that has occurred in your past. And you have discovered that inside the Gungeon is a gun that has the ability to kill the past. Basically meaning that you can go back to that point in time and right that wrong, whatever it was that happened. And so you're venturing in there in order to acquire the pieces of the bullet and the gun that will allow you to kill your past, which will let you go back in time and actually fix that mistake with each character. So you can play the regular game and just beat the end boss of the game, or once you've acquired all of the pieces of the bullet, you can then start killing the past with each one of these characters, which will unlock additional content. Once you've killed the past with all of the characters, you unlock an additional bonus level that gives you an additional end boss that will then unlock a bunch of content. You kind of get the picture. The game is full of Easter eggs. Like, the entire game is one gigantic, like, pop culture smirk to everything you can imagine. They have, the latest expansion, for example, is called Gungeons and Dragons. Of course, referencing Dungeons and Dragons. They have lots of different references with their various bosses. To continue D&D references, they have a Mind Flayer and a Beholster as bosses. In case you hadn't noticed, gun puns are also the order of the day for Enter the Gungeon. They have Vulcan Raven is one of the bosses, which is a Metal Gear Solid reference, but in this case he's a gigantic muscly bird with a Vulcan cannon. So it's both literal and Easter eggy. And it kind of continues from there. You know, a lot of the guns directly reference things. They have a gun called Deckard, which references Blade Runner, and various other things. The references are hilarious. They kind of make me feel a lot like Clank in Space references, if you have played Clank in Space or seen Clank in Space. Like, they reference everything they can think of. Other video games, particularly a lot of other indie video games, like the Super Meat Gun appears as a reference to Super Meat Boy, among other things. They reference all sorts of stuff, and it's really cool to unlock things over time as you play. I really suck at the game. I think everybody sucks at the game when they start. But over time I've gotten better, and I've started to get a little bit further. I started off not being able to beat the first boss, and now I can regularly get to the second level, but I can't always beat the second level's boss, and slowly but surely, like, you'll get more used to the controls and the timings and everything. The company that makes it is called Dodge Roll, and one of the biggest mechanisms inside the game is the dodge roll mechanism that your character uses. Basically, they ripped it off of Dark Souls, if you're familiar with Dark Souls at all. I've never played Dark Souls. I've seen other people play Dark Souls. Basically, in that game, you can roll to avoid damage. So inside Enter the Gungeon, your characters can also roll. They can roll through bullets in order to not take damage, even though the bullet passes through their sprite. It also has other things, like there are tables in the levels that you can flip up and hide behind, like temporary cover. It's a really, really clever little game. And it's full of content. They released the main game like 2 years ago, and then they dropped a expansion for it called the Supply Drop, which they beta tested forever and then eventually released, and then now they've just in the past couple weeks released the Gungeons and Dragons DLC for it. So there's just a ton of content in this game to explore. I know people who've played hundreds of hours of this game, and it's really good fun. Like, once you're in it, you kind of get in the zone, and, you know, you become one with the gun. You're rolling, and everything becomes better. You start thinking about it. You start dreaming about it. It's one of those kinds of games that can really consume a lot of your time and mental energy in a good way, I feel. But it's unlike a lot of the other games that I play, it is real-time, so it's something that I'm getting used to. I haven't been a big player of real-time games for quite a while, like since my PlayStation 2 days. I never had a PlayStation 3 or an Xbox of any variety, or PS4, any of that stuff. I've never ventured into any of those kinds of consoles. So the most real-time thing I've played recently is I played Doom 2016 on my friend's PS4 for a while. That's pretty much it. Like, So this is a little bit uncharacteristic of a choice for me, but I'm having great fun with it. And part of it is just because I get the references and the pop culture jokes, and every time I uncover something I feel accomplished, even though I'm not getting very far in the game yet. I still feel like I'm getting somewhere. And that's really rewarding, and I think that's the entire idea behind roguelikes. I think a lot of the legacy stuff that we see in board gaming recently is a similar trend to roguelikes, where you have the individual instances of the game, but you have an overall meta story or experience that exists on top of it. And I think having that two layers keeps you invested even when the individual instance of the game doesn't really go your way. But I really enjoy both of those games. They're very different ends of the spectrum. Cultist Simulator is a very contemplative, slow, thinky experience where you can pause and read a whole bunch of narrative text and get into the story. And Enter the Gungeon is like fast adrenaline twitch action with a bunch of silly puns and references and goofiness. And they kind of encapsulate both ends of the gaming spectrum for me. The two games I talked about yesterday kind of sit somewhere in between the two. But I just really wanted to highlight all four of them because I haven't video gamed as much in years as I have in the last 6 months or so with these four games, and just kind of playing them as the mood takes me, swapping from one to another whether I'm in the mood for some Twitch gameplay or I want something slower and more contemplative. Enter the Gungeon I actually play on my Switch. It is available on PC, obviously, but I play it on the Switch and really, really enjoy it there. It's something that I can play away from my computer, which is really cool. All of the other games I play on Steam. If Slay the Spire ever gets a mobile version, I will probably lose my life to that, because I will be playing it literally everywhere it is possible to play it. But overall, I really enjoy all four of those games and figured I'd give them a shout out. So that's it for today's Vlogust. We'll see what I talk about tomorrow, because I'm not even sure yet. But have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.